Hey, welcome back, everybody. Happy early 4th of July. Just got one day to go here, and obviously the big story today is Hurricane Beryl and its ongoing impacts through Jamaica and likely impacts towards the Yucatan Peninsula, down to Belize, and then eventually, potentially the Gulf Coast of Mexico, Texas, or even as far north as Louisiana. Still have some questions to kind of figure out in that part, but we'll definitely break all that down for you in today's video. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely consider doing so. Like the video if you like it. And the big goal is to get to 10,000 subscribers here by the end of hurricane season. And we've only got even less than 2,000 to go. So I think it's a very reachable goal, especially with how active the season has been so far and how active it will likely be on down the road. So for anybody new, definitely consider doing that. And for all my returning viewers, again, appreciate it. It means the world to me that you come back and watch, even on videos like this that are not maybe as geared towards the exact forecast in your area and just more of a tropical specific video. But this time of year, we're just gonna have a lot of videos like this, as this is kind of the big weather story for a lot of folks. So again, just that's kind of what you can expect. A couple other housekeeping things very quickly. I will be leaving today, this afternoon, to head back towards upstate South Carolina for a couple of days to spend some time with family. I am actually going to still try to get videos out. Production quality, I will tell you, will not be nearly what it is right now. The videos will have to be shorter just due to kind of limitations I'll be working with. But nonetheless, I will still try to get probably about 10, maybe 15-minute videos out for you folks. And just continue to track this hurricane, as again, potential U.S. impacts could arrive, in less than a week. So definitely something that needs to be talked about. I think with all that said, though, we can go ahead and jump on into your forecast and start talking about these pretty colors that you see on behind me here as we're looking at our long-wave infrared satellite imagery this morning. So, Hurricane Beryl is really not hard to find at all. It's this big area of convection and cold cloud tops that you're seeing, and again, knocking on the doorstep of Jamaica as I'm recording this at about 9 a.m., and will continue to kind of skirt the southern coastlines of Jamaica today before eventually then by the time we're getting into overnight tomorrow and into early Friday morning hitting the Yucatan Peninsula. And then by the time we're getting towards this weekend, that's whenever the question marks begin. We could get a track like this. We could get a track like this. We could get a track that's something more like this and just hits Mexico. And that's kind of where the question marks arise, kind of once we get towards this storm being in the Gulf. One other thing or a couple of things I'll briefly point out, behind Beryl, we do have a tropical wave that's looking a little bit more impressive this morning, but not going to really touch on that too much in today's video. National Hurricane Center still only giving that about a 20% chance of development, although again, I will mention looking a little bit better this morning than maybe previous days, so don't let your guard down completely on that, but obviously big story is Beryl. Also back home into the United States, we do have a bit of a trough digging on down. This is, creating a line of storms from Texas, Oklahoma, all the way up through the Ohio River Valley, and even up into eastern Canada. So I do want to mention that. Again, low pressure kind of swirling here, and that trough situated kind of like so. So again, that's kind of what we're looking at back that way. All right, Hurricane Beryl. As I talked about in yesterday's video, a weakening trend was expected, and we did get a small one last night, but I also mentioned in yesterday's video that the core of this storm is so kind of well put together that it was going to take a lot of work to weaken this thing, and unfortunately, we really just haven't seen all that much weakening between yesterday's video and today's. Now, we are back down to Category 4 status, but this is still a powerful Category 4 storm, and all of you folks in Jamaica are unfortunately going to figure that out very quickly, as likely the northern eye wall of Beryl scrapes the southern coastline of Jamaica, where unfortunately the country's capital is, as well as most of its population. So that's the unfortunate thing here. Now, some slight good news. We again do have some southwesterly shear, especially kind of here at the mid-levels, kind of trying to disrupt the core of this system. And you can even see that on satellite. Here's the center of the storm. Most of the convection in the outer banding is off towards the north and west, again being indicated by that shear here, kind of pushing that up, and also trying to inject just a little bit of dry air into the storm. But unfortunately, Beryl has really created its own environment here that it's taken a lot of work to kind of weaken this thing. So again, pretty unfortunate stuff there, but nonetheless a powerful Category 4 hurricane. Deep cloud tops here, very strong eye wall, and even some pretty feisty outer bands here with this storm, and that will continue today. And unfortunately, a weakening trend again is slightly expected, but unfortunately not overly going to weaken throughout the next day or so. All right, current visible satellite imagery, noticing the sun rising up here over Beryl over the past couple of hours, and just notice in these past couple of frames here, the convection is still firing here just fine. Along the eye here, you'll notice some of these overshooting tops that I will point out. In fact, I'm going to pause satellite just so it's not looping the entire time, but look at this band right here near the eye. Again, the eye's no longer open, it is closed again due to some of that wind shear, but we've got some big time thunderstorms here on the northern and northeastern side of this eye wall, and again, unfortunately, here's the center of the storm with a track kind of like this. This thing is going to really scrape the southern coast of Jamaica. So very strong winds, again, sustained winds could be up near 140 miles an hour, gusting up near potentially 160, 175. Storm surge is going to be a problem here, especially kind of into some of these inlets and coves along the island here. Going to have some storm surge issues. Now, the good news is Jamaica is a relatively mountainous country, so the reason that is good is storm surge isn't going to get as far inland as maybe a place like Louisiana would see if this storm was moving in, but still, storm surge will be a problem, very heavy rainfall will be a problem, and again, just very strong winds that are going to really just be driving debris, and unfortunately, the infrastructure in Jamaica is just not as good as other places, so, that's something that's going to, be a big impact, and we're really going to want to pray for these folks as they're dealing with this storm today. One other tad bit of good news I will mention is Beryl is moving quickly. So again, right now, 145 mile an hour Category 4 hurricane, pressure down towards 952 at the latest advisory. But forward motion is quite quick. I don't think it's quite showing up here, but I want to say it's moving at about 20 miles an hour, which is plenty quick enough to get this thing out of here relatively quickly compared to, some other storms. All right, so latest advisories and latest track here. Obviously, hurricane warnings up for all of Jamaica as this storm approaches, and again, could very likely make a landfall on the extreme southern tip of the island. Hurricane warnings also up for the Cayman Islands. Luckily, the storm will continue a slow weakening trend up to that point, and should be a little bit further south of those islands than Jamaica, but again, nonetheless, hurricane warnings are important for those areas, and also hurricane watches up from the tip of the Yucatan all the way through Cancun and down even towards the northern coastline of Belize here, and then tropical storm watches as far south as Belize City. Those already issued, and the track itself is, one that has evolved a little bit, but overall has stayed pretty steady. In fact, this same track has been basically what the National Hurricane Center has been calling for since the birth of this storm. Definitely some great forecasting by those folks. Latest forecast, though, for intensity at landfall in the Yucatan, likely a strong Category 2 storm. And yesterday they said Category 1, and I mentioned, this storm's going to take a lot to weaken, so don't rule out a Category 2, maybe even a Category 3. And I think this forecast is a lot more realistic. Again, kind of on that fringe, kind of ballpark Category 2. Could be a little stronger, could get to weak Category 3. But I think we'll really see, again, this slow but weakening trend nonetheless over the next 24 hours or so, as this, 24 to 36 hours really before landfall on the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, obviously, going to weaken from that land interaction and likely will exit right back into the Gulf of Mexico early Saturday morning, overnight Friday as a tropical storm. But then after that, this is when the intensity forecast really gets tricky in the Gulf. And we've seen it so many times the past couple of years. These storms get in the Gulf and then we get that rapid intensification. Is that something we will see with Beryl? It's a very real possibility, unfortunately, that track, again, taking it up generally towards the Brownsville, Texas area, but you'll notice the Texas coastline from Let me see if I can find a city in here. We'll say Port O'Connor in Texas, all the way south through Brownsville. All of you are in the cone of uncertainty. So, National Hurricane Center is saying, yeah, this storm could impact you folks. And in fact, depending on model trends, we may see this even get bent back a little bit further towards the north. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that, given the overall trends that we've seen in Beryl's intensity and track forecast over the past couple of days. So again, intensity forecast is going to be the toughest part here. Feeling pretty good about the track and feeling pretty good about intensity up towards the Yucatan. But once we get up here in the Gulf, again, wind shear and dry air questions still need to be answered. And again, we'll definitely do that over the next couple of days. Sorry, I just slammed my knee into my desk, so you probably heard that. But all right, so I did pull this up because I wanted to see if we had updated spaghetti models, and we do, so awesome. Hot off the press here, this just dropped. Basically, as I'm recording this, new spaghetti models. And yeah, so this is kind of what I was talking about. In fact, I'll pull up the previous models. This is from overnight last night. Take a look at those. And you'll notice, again, most of these kind of bringing this just south of Brownsville. But the latest model runs from this morning, brings some more members kind of up further north. And in fact, we're seeing a bit of a divergence between model guidance. So we've got one cluster just south of the Rio Grande there into the Mexico coastline. And then we have another cluster that is curving the storm a little bit quicker and making a landfall somewhere into Texas. So again, this is something we're going to need to watch. And right now, I'll tell you, I'm pretty well on board with this cluster of models. The main reason for that is just the trends we've seen overall in Beryl's intensity, and kind of the ensemble members that are showing this have done a much better job at grasping the current intensity of the storm, and I think are doing a better job at grasping the future intensity of the storm. So right now, if I had to pick a landfall location, and again, this is going to change, but I would say Texas is probably the state that we see that final landfall of Beryl before, again, moving all the way inland. Not to say that it's not going to make landfall in Mexico. Again, most of the cone that we just looked at shows more of a Mexico landfall, but I just think the trends over the next couple of days are going to really kind of curve this thing a little sooner and bring it up towards Texas. So anyone really from Louisiana all the way down towards the southern Mexico Gulf Coast need to be monitoring the track of Beryl and the intensity, obviously, as well. But again, a little bit of a divergence in some of these models in the morning runs that are, again, fresh here. So why are we seeing this divergence? What's the big problem here? Why is this not a straight shot answer? Well, it all has to do with kind of our steering currents in the mid layers of the atmosphere. This is 500 millibars up, which if you don't, know exactly what that means, just know that this is going to show us, where the hurricane is going to go. So the current picture that we're looking at right now is a pretty simple one and explains a lot. We've got high pressure here in this orange color, and in the northern hemisphere, this rotates clockwise. And because of that, this is Beryl. It's kind of pushing Beryl, again, past Jamaica into the Yucatan, and then eventually into the Gulf. Now, watch what happens, though. Again, as I mentioned this morning on satellite, we've got this big mid-level trough here showing up over the northern United States, and as we go through the next couple of days, that trough is going to strengthen and kind of, beat back that ridge a little bit here. And by the time we're getting towards this weekend, this trough is now more of a player than maybe that high pressure. So again, still do have high pressure here, but much weaker. And Beryl, depending on how strong it is, might say, you know what, high pressure, I don't really care what you say. I'm going to keep pulling north. And should it pull far enough north, this trough is likely to pull it up even more and kind of curve it back into Texas and potentially Louisiana. And that's currently my thinking. I think that's probably what's going to happen. Again, these storms, the stronger they are, they really like to pull northward. And most of our models that show that stronger storm really pull this up closer towards Texas and Louisiana. So again, all eyes in those states need to be on Beryl again, because impacts could be as soon as potentially the second half of this weekend. This would be Saturday afternoon. Obviously, you'll notice here a pretty strong tropical system nearing the Texas-Mexico border. And by the time we're getting into Sunday, a landfall potentially Sunday into Monday somewhere into Texas on the latest run of the GFS from this morning. So, again, need to be watching that in those areas. All right, sorry, I'm just looking back at a couple maps here to make sure that everything was covered. Looks good. back to where we were. Now let's talk about intensity a little bit. We talked about the trouble, with the track, and we'll even do that some more here in a minute. But let's talk about the intensity of this storm. Obviously, again, it has maintained itself relatively well, numbers-wise, even if on satellite it's not that same buzzsaw we saw maybe 48 hours ago or so. And the main reason for that is this shear. Again, we've been talking about this. We've got a little bit of a trough here that is kind of digging back down into the Caribbean. And unfortunately, it's just going to be kind of hard to see on this map. Maybe white might show up a little bit better. Yeah, probably a little bit there. So again, this trough is pulling down some shear as we get that divergence and kind of the speeding up of the winds. And Beryl is kind of riding this a little bit. So we've got, again, these more unfavorable areas in red, but Beryl is just to the south of that. So here's the center of the storm in pink I just drew. And again, not in the worst of this year, but there is some nonetheless that is helping to kind of weaken the storm a little. And unfortunately, Beryl's going to continue to just kind of ride the edge of the strongest shear. So it's not going to be enough to destroy the storm by any means, but it is enough to impact it some. And we have seen that in some satellite imagery this morning. Again, as some of this convection and some of this water vapor you'll even see is really kind of lopsided a little bit on the top right hand side of the storm. All right, so this is water vapor loop, and I think this is pretty important as well for showing the dry air potential. And we are seeing some signs that some of that shear is aiding in a little bit of dry air injection into the storm here. And again, I'm going to pause it right here just so we can kind of draw some here. So again, we're getting shear kind of like this, especially on the northern side of the storm. But we also have a little bit of dry air on the southern edge of the storm that Beryl is kind of getting fed a little bit here. So you'll notice specifically this one band of dry air kind of trying to wrap up into the storm a little bit. Unfortunately, though, again, it's not going to be enough to kill the storm. And in fact, a lot of this air that it's moving into is relatively saturated, especially compared to some of these drier pockets, specifically on the backside of the storm. We would hope would maybe be feeding into the storm, but unfortunately dry air, again, a slight inhibiting factor, but not a big one as we look into the future here. All right, wind shear forecast moving ahead. Again, as we get into the rest of today and tomorrow, wind shear will continue to be a problem. This is getting into the afternoon of the 4th of July. You'll notice, again, this trough is still showing up and still some wind shear here, but it's not over the entire storm. It's just kind of parts of the storm that are getting sheared apart, much like today. And if I take a sounding here, just to show this to you in a sounding profile, I can do that. So, this is really what we're going to be looking at here is this line here. These are wind speeds at different heights of the atmosphere. And many of you should be relatively familiar with wind barbs, but if not, I'll just go ahead and give you the simple answer here. Right here, kind of in the low and mid levels, we're getting some pretty strong wind speeds. And again, that is what is kind of ripping apart some of that convection a little bit and pushing it away from the center of circulation here. And that's something that we're going to have to hope for continuing. But these are not off the chart values of shear. These are about 20 knots or so. So at least in these lower to mid levels. And again, that will help to do some damage, at least prevent any more strengthening. But unfortunately, it will not last forever. And in fact, a lot of our models on approach towards the Yucatan within that last 6 or 12 hours kind of begins a re-strengthening process and getting out towards the weekend, Friday afternoon here, again, exiting back over the Gulf. And overnight Friday into Saturday, if I just take another kind of general environmental sounding over the storm system, we'll see that these wind shear values once again drop off pretty considerably. These wind barbs much more favorable for tropical cyclone strengthening and development. So wind shear, we're going to have to really use as much as we got right now, but unfortunately, once this thing gets back in the Gulf, signs are that wind shear could calm down. And anytime we have low wind shear and low, or I guess I should say abundant precipitation or lack of dry air, I guess is a better way to word it. Anytime we have those ingredients in those very warm ocean waters, that could spell trouble. Now, the good news is, in terms of dry air, there are some signs that as this gets back over the Gulf here this weekend, Again, here's the center of the storm. Some dry air, again, could be on the south side, much like I just showed you currently. That could help to limit some intensification. But overall speaking, it's not a ton of dry air. In fact, there's a lot of moisture on the northern side of the storm, but again, enough on the southern side that could try to wrap into the storm, I think, this weekend, again, limiting rapid intensification. So that is something that we will definitely hope for. All right, let's break down some models here, and wow, this has already gone 20 minutes. I will go ahead and I'm going to just say this real quick. If you're ever wondering if you have a passion for weather, this is a good way to tell. A lot of the times these videos, I say, this will be about 10 minutes, and then I start looking at maps, and next thing you know, I'm not even done here. In fact, I'm only probably about 75% done, and this has gone for 20 minutes. So, again, kind of really, you have to discipline yourself on the timing here, but again, just something I guess I'll throw in there as a tidbit. So yeah, back to the actual hurricanes here and not about me. So again, this is our latest HAFS A model. This is a hurricane model, again, built specifically for hurricanes. And it's one possible solution. I'll show you 3 models total. This is the first one I'll show you. Again, Jamaica impacts throughout the day today. As we mentioned earlier on in the video, big time impacts there. And then back over the Caribbean this afternoon and evening, some very slight weakening probable overnight tonight and into tomorrow. But once we get into tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening, the weakening trend will probably kind of flatline a little bit. And if anything, we might even re-strengthen a tad on immediate approach towards the Yucatan Peninsula. Landfall here looks to be early Friday morning, Eastern time, that is, Eastern Central Time. Here for the Yucatan, and it'll likely stay over the Yucatan for a good 12 hours or so. So we get about 12 hours for land interaction and even some leftover shear to kind of rip apart the storm a little bit, but it's not going to completely degrade it. And we'll be right back over the Gulf here by early Saturday morning. And then we've got from Saturday morning all the way up to potentially, the entire weekend, maybe even into early Monday before we're out of time and this storm is once again making another landfall. And that's assuming landfall is in Mexico. If, we get a path that's a little bit more like this, we're going to get a lot more time to kind of milk the time over the water, I guess, if you will, and really tap into that heat content at the surface of the ocean, as well as those lower wind shear values that are currently predicted. But this model brings a pretty strong Category 2, probably Category 3 storm here just south of Brownsville, Texas. And even if landfall's in Mexico, this would cause some pretty big storm surge problems throughout the Texas coastline. In fact, you remember a couple weeks ago, Alberto was only a tropical storm, and we had flooding issues into the Texas coastline. So this also going to bring its own problems. All right, that's one model. And I'll show you another one here, the Icon model, the German-created model. Again, we'll kind of skip through the next couple of hours. We've talked about that. Again, weakening trend will kind of flatline a little bit throughout the day tomorrow. And in fact, maybe even strengthen a tad back on approach towards the Yucatan. Again, same landfall time, about 5 in the morning or so. On Friday morning, stays over there for about 12 hours. The Icon model, though, you'll notice even spends a little less time. It kind of really cuts across the northern part of the Yucatan, and it could be more of 8 hours over land before back over the Gulf here again as early as Friday evening. And then from then on out, it just stays over the Gulf, taps into some lower wind shear values, especially closer towards Texas here. And strengthens big time Saturday evening, Sunday afternoon, and then this model, the Icon, bringing landfall near the Texas Louisiana border there. So again, a different location, but all things considered, this is only about 100 miles off from the southern tip of Texas and the northern Mexico coastline all the way up towards Louisiana coastline. That's only a couple hundred miles, and we're still, about 5 days from this happening. So it's not that much of a spread, and it's not that out of the question that we see a solution like this. And again, this a major hurricane landfalling in the United States about 5 days from now. So again, a trend we'll need to watch. Final model I'll show you here is the H-Wharf. I think the H-Wharf has done an incredible job so far with Beryl, so I'm going to put a little bit more weight into it. And you'll notice here, again, this afternoon, impacting Jamaica big time as we talked about. And then, again, a weakening trend, probably getting back down towards Category 2 status on approach towards the Yucatan. And again, maybe a quick transition back to Category 3 right up to landfall here Friday morning. stays over the Yucatan again about 12 hours or so, and then right back over the Gulf early Saturday morning here, and just begins to intensify and potentially pretty quickly. And then here we go. Unfortunately, H-Wharf showing a very strong hurricane, a major hurricane right off the coast of Texas early Monday morning, and moving in for a landfall likely Monday afternoon. So those are three big models that we have. I think are doing a overall pretty good job handling the storm. And again, most of those are shifted up north. Again, I think that's the most likely scenario right now. Excuse me, my nose is really itchy all of a sudden. Sorry, that's going to get on my nerves. Sorry, talking about hurricanes, that's right. So again, a potential landfall in Texas I think is very realistic right now. That's something we will definitely have to watch out for. But do know a lot of our ensemble members do still show the storm, impacting Mexico instead directly. Again, indirect impacts I think are likely in southern Texas no matter what at the very minimum. But landfall itself with a lot of these ensemble members, these are overnight European ensemble runs, show, most of these members into Texas, but still, again, notice the stronger members are further north. And Beryl so far has been overperforming expectations in the strength department, so should that continue, these northerly members could be a problem for Texas, and the GFS also shows that even more so. A lot more of these GFS ensemble members bringing this up towards Texas. And again, those are the stronger members. I think those are handling it better. That's why I'm currently leaning towards that thought process here in the long run. Alrighty, so a pretty long video today, about 26 minutes or so. I do apologize. Again, that's a lot of time to talk about one tropical system, but, there's a lot of places that could be impacted, or really will be impacted, I should say. And a lot of question marks in the intensity forecast and the track as well that we need to figure out. But I feel confident over the next couple of days we'll know a lot more. As for impacts to Texas and Louisiana, we'll know a lot more by Friday, and especially Saturday, as we see exactly where this storm comes ashore in the Yucatan, how long it stays over the Yucatan, how much it gets ripped apart, and where it exits back over the Gulf. And obviously we'll have a lot more information on our mid-level and upper-level wind patterns over the continental United States by then as well, which will help us kind of figure out these steering currents. So again, a lot of things we're going to find out, but overall the forecast for Beryl has been pretty good so far. And again, I feel pretty confident in those big impacts in Jamaica definitely today, then the Yucatan Friday, and then likely I think the Gulf Coast of Texas, or maybe as far north as Louisiana going into early next week. But we'll hope that some of these southern members that show more of a Mexico landfall, at least we'll hope for our Texas people and Louisiana people, we'll hope that that's a little more realistic. With that said though, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all next time.